And without further ado, I want to hand over the reins to Dana Harris, the editor-in-chief of IndieWIRE. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. As Eugene was saying, he launched IndieWIRE 15 years ago. Actually, yesterday was the first issue of it. We have it on the site if you haven't seen it. You should take a look. It's amazing how much things have changed and how much things have remained the same. Many of the stories look as if they could have appeared in IndieWIRE today in terms of the kind of things that they were talking about. But the panel that we're doing is focusing on what's happened in those 15 years in terms of distribution. Which also has stayed the same and changed in tremendous ways. I want to start by having everybody introduce themselves, and then I've got a quick question to follow up with it. So everybody, just say your name and tell everybody what you're doing now. Where do you work? What do you do?
Hi, Jeanne Berney, and I am Executive Vice President of Marketing at Film District, new company I hope everybody's heard of, and I was an iPop photographer for IndieWIRE when it started.
Hi, I'm Arianna Bocco. I am SVP of Acquisitions at IFC Films and Sundance Selects. I was not. I am a photographer.
I probably took your picture.
Yeah, probably. Oh.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Mark Urman, and I run a film company called Paladin.
I'm Ira Deutchman, and I run a company called Emerging Pictures, which is a digital exhibition network, and I also run the producing program at Columbia University.
And Bob Berney, president of Film District. I work with Jeanne and Bill Thompson up in the audience. Bill?
Bingham Ray, I'm an independent film consultant.
I'm Amy Heller. I'm the president of Milestone Films, and we mostly do archival films.
Richard Abramowitz, and I too am an independent film consultant.
So, and now starting again, Jeanne, tell us what you were doing 15 years ago, summer of 1996.
I'm glad you prompted me on this, and this gives all of you a chance to think. I think I was doing Big Night, at Reicher Entertainment, which was a small movie up against a lot of big movies, and came out to be a big success and a lot of fun.
I lived in LA, and I was an assistant in the acquisitions department at New Line Cinema and Fine Line Features.
I guess
96.
96. In 96, I guess I ran a PR company. I did publicity for independent films mostly.
Where was that at?
DDA, Dennis Davidson Associates.
Wow, kind of complicated. I was, at that particular moment in time, I had just been booted out of Fine Line. And
make room for Arianna.
yeah, and I was actually, I became an independent producer for a period of time, starting right around then, something I actually didn't really want to do, but, I don't know if you know this, but when you work for any studio-related company, when they get rid of you, they give you a producing deal. So I said, oh, okay, I'll try that out for a while.
So actually, not curious, why were you booted out?
It relates very directly to what we're going to be talking about. Do you want to talk about that now, or do you want to?
No, go ahead.
Yeah. Good.
We'll get to it. All right, Bob, I'm really curious to know, what were you doing in the summer of 96? Because you've had so many jobs.
Well, since I've been working on it since coming down this way. And I know, because I was just Bingham, like when Happiness was, but that was 97. So I wasn't doing that. I did that after. You know what? I was working. It was strange. It's going to come for this company called Banner Entertainment. It was Mickey Liddell, who's still around. Like he had films at Sundance, and Brian Swardstrom, who's at Endeavor, and we were making a film called Go with Doug Liman. It was the one after Swingers that we were going to fund and then distribute, and we ended up selling it to Sony and never releasing it. But it was fun because we had an editing room, just a small editing room on Sunset, and Mickey and Doug Lyman go in there, and they actually, like, pieces of equipment got thrown around, and like things came through the wall. It was fun. It was fun. I think that was it.
I was a sophomore in high school. While I was a sophomore in high school, I was at October Films, and in the summer of '96, we were prepping Secrets and Lies and Breaking the Waves for release that fall.
I was a new mom. My son was born in March of '96, so I'm a little hazy on the entire year. And we had just released Hirokazu Korieda's film. Actually, we were readying it it had opened at New Directors in March, actually the day my son was born, and we were getting it ready for theatrical opening in the fall at his film Mabaroshi, his first feature, at the Lincoln Plaza.
And what company was that?
Oh, I've been at the same place for 21 years, which is Milestone.
Okay.
I was raising money to produce films independently and earning a living by consulting with producers and video distributors, helping them get access to the theatrical market.
Okay, so of note is that of most of the jobs that you guys are talking about, most of those companies don't exist anymore. Which to me, at the same time, you guys are all basically in the same field. I mean, obviously, Mark, you went from PR to distribution, but you guys are still doing, in many ways, the same sorts of things that you were doing back then and that have evolved. I want to ask, what is the biggest change that you've seen in this time? I know that obviously many of the tenets of distribution have remained the same, but if you had to look back 15 years, what's one of the biggest things you would say that is different now than it was in '96?
Well, I think the speed at which things occur is, for me, the most dramatic change. Everything was about duration back then. You worked on a movie for a long time, and the process of preparing the campaign and the amount of time a film stayed in release went very, very slow and could build.
When you say slow, like how much time are you talking about?
Months and months and months. I mean, a film that was a hit could be in active release for a year. And it was important that one had the appropriate sense of rhythm, that everything we did was about building. And now, because even a successful film, even a huge studio successful film that makes $1 billion is in and out in 90 to 120 days, everything you do has to be done at an accelerated pace. And the choices that people make as to whether to see a film in the theater or not has changed, because people used to routinely decide to get around to seeing the film in its third month of release. Well, now the third month of release is 5 minutes before the DVD or VOD release, so they may not get around to seeing it all in theaters. So that, for me, has changed absolutely everything that any of us, or most of us, do.
Right, no, I totally agree with that. Bob, I'm curious, how many jobs have you had between now and '96?
Let me think. I don't think we were afraid to add him up.
But he's only had one wife.
Yeah, right.
Secret to success.
But I mean, a lot of different things, but I don't think it ever changes. It's always like, no matter what you do, it's like, is the next one going to work? Or something, there's always the pressure of the investors and the film, But I'm trying to think. Then I went after Happiness, after they were forced not to do Happiness, I worked on that. Then Memento, but as a consultant, then IFC, and then back to Newmarket, because we sort of started it, then stopped while I started IFC, then back to Newmarket, then Picture House, Apparition, and now Film District. So not that many, but it seems like it.
Seemed like a lot.
Seems like a lot.
So, Ira, tell me. Tell me. Go back to the booting out story, but also because
You should ask him. I think you probably can comment really really well in what's changed in 15
Yeah.
years. You should
Well,
not let
I mean,
that-
the two fundamental changes that have really pulled the rug out from all of us is that, number one, the critics regionally have just don't have the power. I mean, they don't exist anymore. They don't exist anymore. There's no more regional critics. So it means that, on the one hand, whatever power is left in the hands of any critics at all is in the hands of the New York Times and Roger Ebert, and that's pretty much it.
Kenny.
Okay, and Kenny. All right. Sorry? Yes. Well, I mean, the point is that it's a few places that get syndicated all over the country. So what it means is that whereas you used to have other opportunities to make a film work, even if it didn't work in New York or if it didn't work in certain parts of the country, those opportunities really don't exist anymore. And then the second one, which relates to what Mark is talking about, is that you just don't have any time for word of mouth to become a factor. You're in and out of theaters so fast that, so, you know, I mean, if you think about it, if you have a movie that you don't have big stars, you don't have a well-known director, you have some aspect of the subject matter that's not necessarily incredibly commercial, those movies used to have a chance because either the critics would save them or word of mouth would save them, and hopefully both. And since word of mouth and the press are essentially defanged, we no longer, I mean, it's almost impossible to put those kinds of movies into the marketplace anymore. And then I would say that the other thing is the constant availability of films. It's always been true that it's been hard to make people believe that there was any sort of urgency to go see a particular movie. And that's the reason why sometimes it had to be left in the marketplace for 6 months before people would catch on and finally go to see the film. Well, now it's just impossible to create a sense of urgency. Everybody knows that if they don't go see it in a theater, it's no big deal because it's always going to be available somewhere.
If it isn't already available.
Right. I mean, I've been joking around for years and years and years about this, but it's more true now than ever, where, if you want to really create some urgency around seeing a movie, what you should do is advertise that it's going to be one night only and you're going to burn the negative. And then maybe people would believe you that they've got to run out and see it. You still want to know why I was...
Oh, I do, but it's actually, we can wait on that. Bingham, really good.
These are important factors, no question, but movie-going has changed. Habits of movie-going have changed. Audience, core audience, which was bigger 15 years ago than it is today. Reason is that audience has gotten older. They still go, but they go in a more selective manner than they used to, and it hasn't been replenished by a younger audience. Ira, years and years ago, back in 1947, said that at a panel such as this, that the audience, what he worried about was the audience for independent films getting older, and that what his fear was that a younger audience, which had been there a generation ago to keep it fresh from underneath, was going to stop going. And that's, in fact, I believe, what's changed. There's a lot of other factors, and all of these are very relevant, but movie-going has changed. And younger audience. Now, when I was a sophomore in high school, literally, we'd come into Manhattan and see movies all the time. All of us did. And whether we're in Manhattan or LA or whatever city we were growing up in, Tulsa, we're going to the movies when we were 16, 15, and we're going to see these kinds of films. And films that were challenging and provocative and different than Hollywood films at the time. We would see those as well, but not as often. And now that just doesn't happen. That doesn't happen with my teenage daughters and my 24-year-old son. I mean, these guys are pretty informed because they have some proximity to the film business. But their friends, they don't care about independent films. They don't care about foreign language films. They don't care about the films that I'm passionate about. They don't want to know. And I find that is somewhat alarming, but it was alarming 20 years ago. And it's I hate to say it, but it's worse now. And the economy has changed. Ticket prices are greatly inflated. When I was working across the street for Dan Talbot, the ticket price at Cinema Studio and at the brand new Lincoln Plaza was $5. That's a big change. And with Richard at NYU, when I visited his class, you ask the students if they go, and they say no, ticket prices are too expensive. So these are all factors, but I just think that right now we're in a period where 15 years ago, films that were in the marketplace, say, as I mentioned, Secrets and Lies or Breaking the Waves, films that we released in the fall of '96. Secrets and Lies did $13 million box office. It would never, ever come close to that today. Breaking the Waves was a very challenging film by Lars von Trier, did $5 million. It wouldn't do that today. And I think that's a huge glacial change. I mean, there's been tectonic shifts, and it's hard to account for that. When you see great films today doing what is now a great business at $1 million or $1.2 million, and people are celebrating it and dancing in the streets, I just, I hate to feel like some old codger, but I would say, gee, if we did $1.2 million on a film in 1994, we would have been kicking ourselves. It's just not good enough.
Mark, you've been shaking your head. Do you agree?
Well, I think that movies stay alive in different ways now. When I was growing up, and I grew up in Brooklyn and schlepped into Manhattan, from the age of 12 probably, I went to see old movies. We had revival houses. But if you didn't live in a major metropolis, there was no way to see a movie once it was gone. And even 15 years ago, it was the beginning of home entertainment in the 80s. You didn't get a chance to see a lot of these movies after they came and went. So even though they lingered in the marketplace longer, they were gone. And now movies stay alive or come alive in a whole bunch of different ways. So if my kids, for instance, and I have one kid who sees just about everything when it opens, and another who is less interested. But the one who is less interested, my son, called me last week and said, I just saw Network. Then he saw Hospital because he wanted to see something like Network. He's constantly doing that, and that wasn't possible before. So he called me, he said that I just got The Player on Netflix. Robert Altman's The Player. And this is a very middle of the road kid. He's not edgy at all. So I think that he just isn't. He's
and
great.
you should know that will be streamed on
Yeah.
indieWIRE tomorrow.
That's okay.
So if he doesn't know that already, he will soon.
He'll tell you that. He's in the sports. He's in the business of sports. He's not in the arts, and so I think that's another change. The fact that if you turn on your television set, the history of cinema is available.
Well, I want to get into the Netflix is actually definitely a topic I want to cover in part of this, but in terms of Richard, from the kind of work that you're doing now, because you basically said you were a consultant before and you're a consultant now. I think that's kind of, with all due respect, that's kind of disingenuous in terms of what you're really doing, because because the model that you're working on now has I think a lot of relevance for the way that films are working right now. It's like you want to tell the audience a little bit about
being falsely modest.
Well, tell the audience a little bit about what Abramowitz is about.
What I was thinking in terms of what both Ira and Bingham were saying, in terms of the diminished opportunity for word of mouth to develop while a film is on screen, and the fact that the audiences aren't as well educated, that the younger audiences coming up aren't as well versed in the same way. One of the adjustments I think that a lot of us have had to make is to be more aggressive in advanced screenings. We've on a lot of the films I've worked on, we just screened, like last year we probably had 20 advanced screenings of Exit Through the Gift Shop in New York alone. We did things like that. In the smallest markets, we would screen it at least 2 times. Because there, as you say, there is no opportunity to sit. If you don't perform over the weekend, then you're either out on Thursday or you might limp through a second week. And even if you hold reasonably well, somebody's breathing down your back. There's so many pictures that you don't have a chance to sit there and attract an audience over time. So we've had to adjust in that way in terms of being a lot more aggressive in screening in advance. And to Bingham's point, one of the things that I have found is that the more, I don't want to say smaller, but the more specific the audience is, the easier it is, and maybe easier is the wrong word because it's never easy, but in a sense it is easier to attract an audience because you're not, it's not Buckshot. It's not a Tom Cruise movie where everyone is the potential audience. It's a movie, it's Romeo and Juliet in Hebrew or whatever the heck it was.
Yiddish.
It's Yiddish. So that you don't have to. It's even more specific. You don't have to. I mean, you know who your audience is there. You don't have to spend a great deal of money advertising and casting a wide net. It's this audience. All you have to do is basically tell them this is the movie, this is when and where it's showing, and they're going to show up because they're compelled by a lot of other reasons to do it. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get a piece in the Forward if they still publish, or in the Times or the Observer or something like that. But it's more focused effort to get people out. I wanted to also say one thing we're talking about critics. Now if you get a bad review in the Village Voice, it follows you to 17 cities.
Yeah.
You can't. It's it.
Shit on
You
your
get a bad
shoes.
review in the Voice.
Never
You
goes
try to
away.
open in other markets without
And
telling
you say that because basically it's one-stop shopping for the Voice. That's
they
like there's.
they own all the weeklies. So you're.
Oh, and they also, and as you say, they don't have regional critics at those weeklies.
Right, in those weeklies for sure. And there are a handful of markets where there are still critics with influence. Up in Seattle, there's a strong, thoughtful critic who has influence locally. San Francisco, there are still markets like that, but yeah, DC, there are significant places. But I tried a year or two ago to open a movie it was a movie about barbershop quartet competitions. Very, very specific audience. And we tried to open it in the heart of the country. There are 100,000 members in the American Harmony Society, and I had all their emails. I thought that was a pretty good shot. So we tried to open it in the heartland where the story really was told, and realized very quickly that there's no local critic in most of those markets. So if you haven't opened in a major market and your review isn't on a wire service, you're opening cold. So it's really, it took away that possible strategy.
But there are a lot of, I think, sort of ways that we used to open the more platform releases that we apply to our, now Bill and Jeanne and I are doing wide releases, are very in a way, quote, commercial films, except they're all independent films. And I think the one, we did Insidious with James Wan and Lee Winnell, that was, an $800,000 film. We spent a lot to get it, but it was still, in a way, the same because it was it was reviewed well, but it was, it was all on, online. It was all the sort of specific horror critics and the filmmakers definitely talked directly to the audience. I mean, sending out the early materials through James's site and stuff. So, and interesting enough, that film found, and it reminded me of the old days. It found a word of mouth, even though it was a wide release. It continued. We're in our 14th week now, and it just came out on DVD, and the word of mouth really propelled it. It was critics. We did tons of screenings, like Richard said. We screened it everywhere. But it's interesting that sort of it's new. It's kind of a bigger risk for us, but a lot of the things are, the same kind of platform stuff that worked. And Jeanne, you might chime in on some of that.
I think that's well said.
Well, actually, one of the things that Bingham said was that word of mouth has been defanged, and at the same time, obviously, word of mouth is how many of us here, I'm believing, are communicate now. We have Twitter is word of mouth, Facebook is word of mouth, and as you say, it's like word of mouth worked in the favor of Insidious in terms of going on, but word of mouth means something different. Is it, as you say, is it shit on your shoes? It's like if what you get word of mouth starts out well, you have a shot. If it starts out badly, you're just screwed. Is it that simple?
I get texts. My daughter sends me texts 10 minutes into a movie saying, "This is crap. I can't believe I'm sitting here."
Right.
I mean, it's that instantaneous.
It's quick.
That is
very
quick.
But bad word of mouth hurts more than good word of mouth helps.
Yeah.
And it is instantaneous these days. But the shit sticks to your shoes a lot more than the good stuff.
But it's the same thing we used to always say. You can't pay people to go to a bad movie. So you do all the work you can. Yeah,
done that.
Try. Yeah. So that's what's still the same.
Yeah, I was just about to say that good movies will always rise to the top, and that's the one thing that hasn't changed. And, word of mouth, we have 2 documentaries out, to what Richard was saying, in the sense of targeting audiences, and documentaries are doing really well right now. And I think it's because you can target those audiences, and if they're good, the word of mouth is going to propel them. And I think that, there's just a lot more out there. And in terms of social media, I must get 10 invitations a day. And at a certain point, you just ignore everything. And so it's gotta reach a different level of word of mouth, I think, at this point, because we're all inundated with so much now. We're competing with other forms of entertainment, with libraries, with all this. So it's really, it has to reach a different level, I think, than it did 15 years ago.
I want to ask Amy a question about this. You have always, as you say, you've always been at Milestone, and the movies that Milestone does I would think, are always going to have an uphill struggle in terms of finding an audience. It's not going to be an easy fit. Have you seen anything? Has the last 15 years been good, bad, the same for you in terms of that process?
Well, we've always been doing very small, very specific kinds of films, and we've always had an interest in doing archival films. But for many years, we also did new films, especially new documentaries and foreign films. For me, when I think about a release, I'm not only thinking about the theatrical release, but because it's my company, I'm thinking about ancillary rights, DVD, international rights. I have to think about where I can, break even. Sometimes you make money in a theatrical release. Sometimes you have to wait for the ancillaries to, make it all up. And that has really changed. TV sales for foreign films are non-existent. So I don't do foreign films anymore, even though I would love to. And I've really moved to doing much more, working with archives and doing restorations and discoveries. We did Killer of Sheep, we did The Exiles. This year we did On the Bowery, many of which we have world rights, because that's another backup that allows me to have a theatrical release. I still do believe that a theatrical release is a great way to publicize and to get people to begin to see a film. But I no longer think of it as that's the way for people to come see a film. It's the avant-garde of it. But what must follow are all the other media. So, now as we face the end of DVD, probably soon, it's hard to know exactly what's going to happen next. But I'm trying to think of it as, different waves of enabling people to see films that I think are wonderful. So.
Well, and actually on that note, I think it'd probably be a good time to raise the Netflix issue, which has been a hot topic this week. I'm curious as to how you guys feel about dealing with Netflix, and if you have any thoughts around their price hike and their obvious push toward streaming versus DVD. I'd like to hear that.
I would like to say personally, I'm pissed about their price hike.
But just you as a consumer.
Yeah.
I have to say the opposite. I hope they keep raising the prices because they'll drive people back into movie theaters.
But I love them, Netflix. I really do. No, we've always had a deal. We've had a deal, but it's not really. It's the opposite. It's for us in doing bigger films or big releases. Netflix, our deal with them is very different. It's a streaming deal in the pay window, so it's later. So they enable us as an independent to theatrically release movies. I mean, that we don't. We have some access to, stars through Sony. We have some of that, but always as an independent, it's been the limited availability of pay slots and that revenue that can take the risk out of the P&A. And Netflix has put us now on an even keel with the big studios. So because of Netflix, we can really take a chance on big theatrical releases.
But no offense, you're promising them a certain level of theatrical release that's akin to a studio release, which is not, that kind of deal with Netflix is not going to be accessible for the majority of the films that are handled by the people on the panel.
No, but it does enable us to survive and do a lot of different films. And our deal with them is interesting because unlike some of the pay thing, pay deals, the other ones, we don't, there are some requirements, but they're much less, say, onerous than HBO or the other pay services that really don't want any more films. They don't need any.
I think that the rate hikes, if you look at them, it's still a very affordable way to consume movies, especially if you're a consumer in volume. I think that when I got my Roku and started streaming, on my TV instantaneously, it was like a miracle. I could see whatever I wanted. The big frustration was that what was available for streaming, as opposed to waiting the 2 days for it to end up in your mailbox, was limited, mostly old movies. So the reason that they're doing it, as I understand it, is so that there can be more stuff for streaming. And if we are in this transition from DVD to streaming, it strikes me as being inevitable, and ultimately it will be very beneficial to the consumer. And it's, if you add it up, it's not a lot of money. The monthly hike is not a lot of money on an annual basis. If you do a lot of movies, it's nothing.
Bingham, you're gonna...
Well, Netflix has also given birth to a lot of competition who are looking to bite into Netflix's market share, and we all know who they are. Netflix, I disagree, Ira, has given a lot of opportunity to small companies in terms of library deals, given new life and rejuvenated libraries in terms of package deals for prices that are attached to each film individually, that have gone silent, that have played through all of their windows, been relicensed for that format, that platform. And in fact, if you look back maybe more than 15 years ago, there was one outlet here in New York for independent films on cable, which was then a paid channel, was Bravo. And Jonathan Searing, now of IFC and Sundance Selects, one of the giants of independent film in New York, he would pay you $25,000 if your film had some success, had some visibility in a theatrical setting, and you could count on that. That was big money, $25K. Of course, it evolved and it grew. And then we were able, say, at October Films in the early mid-'90s, we had an output deal with HBO. When HBO was certainly different than it is today, and Showtime, but now it's evolved, and now we're online. Now it's a different world. But Netflix, as a consumer, as a guy who likes to see movies, last summer, it was really because of Netflix and only Netflix that I was able, and this is me, I'm insane, I was able to watch chronologically every single John Ford film from the early Silence that he made up till Seven Women, that most of them were available on DVD on Netflix. I had to scurry around and find others. But 5 years ago or 10 years ago, I couldn't have been able to do that. And John Ford is just one filmmaker who's available like that. These are also, of course, available to, I'm scrambling, but in the DIY world, the filmmakers that Richard and others, Mark as well, deal with, they don't have, except for exposure in the theatrical set, that to Netflix and other platforms like Netflix, that Amazon VOD and iTunes and countless others. But so if you're an independent producer, filmmaker, and you don't get picked up by a conventional distribution company, or even outside of that universe, then you're going to have a great amount of trouble trying to access Netflix. But if you're Bob, if you're Ira, if you're Richard, you're going to have a lot more ability to do that. Now I'm consulting for Snag Films, who have a relationship with indieWIRE.
Yeah, they own us.
and learning about the digital world, being a film guy, has been enormously entertaining and interesting. I used to pretend I knew something about the digital world, but I'm learning about it in a slow kind of curve. And it's today, and streaming is the future. I met a man yesterday who's a big guy who had a tablet in front of him, and he said, "This is a television. This is a television." And everybody on a train sitting waiting for someone in a restaurant. They're watching television, and there's going to be more of them available. And so content is going to be king. And the availability of it in that tablet form is an extraordinary thing. I hadn't thought of that, but obviously it's true. You'll be able to stream Netflix on your tablet. You can do it now.
Yeah,
you can
do it. I do it all the time.
I mean, the only thing you just said that I agree with is that streaming is the future. There's no doubt about that. But if you look at the trend lines of where things are going right now, until there's a really viable competitor to Netflix, they're only competing with themselves. And as and the prices keep going down, they know they're the only game in town. They're the only service that's available across all of these platforms. They know they have all of you by the balls in terms of consumers and that's why you're complaining that the prices are going up. The reality is that if you look at the competitive landscape, as Netflix moves away from physical discs, which they really want to get out of that as quickly as they possibly can, and they go straight to streaming, then their competition is HBO. I mean, basically, they're in the same marketplace. HBO is going to start moving toward more of a video on demand, more of a subscription VOD model, sort of like Netflix, while Netflix moves toward more of a broadcast model. Netflix has already invested in their first miniseries, which is going to be head-to-head competing with all the original programming on HBO. And the same thing is going to happen on Netflix has happened on HBO, which is that they're going to turn a corner and they're going to say, we're not interested in independent films anymore. We've got a mass audience. We want to deliver to them what they want. And you're right that there was a moment in time where Netflix was great for smaller independent films, but that's when the studios wouldn't sell them anything.
And that's all. That's
Well,
back in the
I
day of
think
like was it Red Envelope that they did? That
was
that
that
was the
I think they still are great for independent film right now. I mean, we work in a volume business, and we acquire 75 to 100 films a year. A lot of those being foreign films, and there are no outlets for foreign films right now. But I think it is good and it's bad. But right now it's good in that there's always going to be somebody new. There's always going to be somebody new coming in. I do think that there's going to be. The thing is that it's changing extremely quickly right now, and hard disk DVD is going away much faster than anybody anticipated. And so, as a distributor, you have to fill that void, and Netflix is filling that void right now.
But to interject in this, I was looking at the Netflix homepage for streaming this week, and I was rather surprised and dismayed to see that I was looking at all the categories. They have them on this kind of like horizontal grid, and I was wondering, it's like, gee, where's it go? Indie film, specialty, foreign, and you go all the way down, and there's something called cerebral. And for whatever reason, the first few selections were the film Rubber, and then Star Trek: The Next Generation.
Which is very cerebral.
I think that, and then soon that'll be Hobo with a Shotgun. Who's next. I think that's a good title. Cerebral.
Yeah, so
I think though, that in terms of like, you can't look that far ahead because we're all hoping that something else, we're imagining something we don't know is going to happen that's going to be great or something. But for the next few years and stuff, I think Netflix is, it's like it's enabled us to even, be in business. I mean, in that way.
But I think that what you bring up about the interface on how to find movies is actually kind of an issue, and I think it's
a huge issue.
I think it's a huge issue, and I think it's a huge issue not only on iTunes and Netflix, but on VOD and anywhere, because there is so much content. And I think the big question is who's curating it, and how is it getting out there, and how are people finding it? And I think it's a much bigger issue than people talk about. We don't really talk about it, but I know we acknowledge it as, how are people finding our movies? How do we maximize, and it's the same question of distribution. How do you get it out there, and how do you?
If you don't know a movie's there, you don't.
Well, that's the thing. The joke now is, and I know that there's companies who are actually trying to put a stop to this, is that because, if you're ever trying to find a movie on VOD, you're just kind of sitting there scrolling through your TV. And so you now have a lot of movies that it's like the phone book. You try to do whatever you can to start with A, because that's going to greatly increase the chances that you're going to be found. Oh, excuse me.
Yeah, that comes before
Yeah.
the A. No, but films are misclassified.
See, it's the same thing, though. Same thing.
Every cable system has its own way. Like there are movies that I by accident once on demand, and I watch a lot of movies on demand. I live in Montclair, New Jersey. I guess I'm a Comcast customer, and there are hundreds of movies. But once under free movies, which is normally not my, like, why would I want a free movie? You know, like I want to pay.
Why?
Under free movies, I found, and I don't any longer recall what the classification was, but they had sort of changed things, and there was this treasure trove of classic movies. The week that Blake Edwards died, there were like 15 Blake Edwards movies available for free, looking great. But I did not know how to find them, and they somehow weren't there in the A through Z. So it's bizarre, but I was telling you yesterday, the week that Shutter Island came on demand in New Jersey, it was identified as a film starring Michelle Williams and Jackie Earle Haley. Those were the two actors. You know, they tell you who's in a movie. No mention of this Leonardo DiCaprio. So if that's what they're doing to movies, you know, like, how do you know you want to see this new French movie if they don't tell you who the director is and they neglect to tell you that Catherine Deneuve is in it?
Yeah, Richard, talk to a little bit about your model in terms of what you deal with VOD, because VOD is like a very key part of what you do.
Well, actually, not to be rude about it, but it's not. I mean, what I do is largely the theatrical release. It so happens that recently on a film where I handled a theatrical release on Conan O'Brien Can't Stop, it was a day and date VOD release. But it was an accident for me, and more of an inconvenience than anything else from my perspective, because it limited my access to the marketplace. But it was part of a great deal for the filmmakers, for the producers, in terms of the kind of exposure they were able to get. And there was a tremendous amount of press associated with it. We were all over in 20 or 25 markets to start with. I don't know what the VOD numbers were. I don't know if they know yet. I don't know if they'll ever tell me, because on this panel, my guess is Arianna's the only one who knows VOD numbers, and she won't tell.
Yeah, Arianna, what about that?
I didn't mean to put you on. I didn't mean that. No, but I can't speak to it in any great detail because I don't have access to those numbers. I suspect they were quite good.
Well, actually, that's on the VOD front. That's something that is definitely a frustration for us as reporters. Is that box office is something that is of huge importance to track, and we try to track with some great detail. VOD is becoming important. We have absolutely no way of tracking that information. And because the numbers are so opaque.
You sound like most producers.
Yeah. I know. Believe me, I've had this conversation with a lot of them. For you, Arianna, I'll accept you from this for a second. How much insight do you guys have into your VOD numbers?
Well, I do one ongoing consultancy with one VOD distributor, and I sometimes am made aware of the numbers, but it's still very mysterious and still very new. And the way the information comes is far less instantaneous than box office, which is you can get hourly. So,
but arguably, it's like, technically we should be able to do that with VOD too, right? I mean, from a technical point of view.
Technically, but
there's a lot more transparency with video than there's been with VOD.
Yeah.
You would find journals.
Would you speak into the microphone? Okay.
What a concept. You would find a lot more transparency with how many units were shipped on individual titles for home video and then with DVD than has ever been approached yet for VOD. And it's obvious. There was an enormous amount of revenue that was generated from home video and from VHS and DVD. The studios counted on that. Independent companies counted on that. There were certain kinds of films that were exempt from great success, mostly foreign language. It's always been that. But so far, to date, a lot of companies whose core business is in cable VOD or in free on demand, they tend to keep those numbers to themselves. But at the same time, for people like yourself, Dana, they are great spinmeisters. and they put out really solid numbers, although not spectacular. Perhaps there's a lot of truth to that. I mean, they wouldn't outright lie, would they? That's never happened.
They used to lie for the theatrical grosses in the days before there were computers.
Oh yeah, no, I can vividly remember in 1985.
Not that you ever did that, right, Bingham?
When we released Once Bitten, one of the first Jim Carrey movies, we were instructed, Jeff Lipsky, ladies and gentlemen, we were instructed to bump up the weekend take on Once Bitten to make it look better. You know, obviously it was disappointing to some extent, and we had to pump it up. And then we were called on it like 2 days later. That cannot happen now. It's just not possible. The only thing that I can see about on the VOD side, look, there's great mystery and there's zero transparency, except producers will get reports. They'll get financials.
But how long does it take them to get those reports?
Got me. Arianna, what do you say?
I mean, it depends on the movie. It depends on the revenue. Every film is different. Every film is going to be different. And I think that with VOD, it's obviously a very new concept. We've been doing it for 5 years, and we've been doing the day and date model for 5 years. And it's changed dramatically, even within that 5-year period. So I think just sometimes looking at numbers as a number out of context it's very, when you're dealing with producers who are trying to figure out movies, it has to be put into a context, and it's a very much evolving platform, and it's still changing. So I think, it's one thing to say, there's no numbers that are transparent, but those numbers have to be kind of boiled down into what does this actually mean,
Because there's not the same.
And every film is different. I mean, you're talking about films that are very indie films that we did, a lot of day and date films, and you're talking about a lot larger films and different genres and different. I mean, it's all.
There's a lot of different types of VOD. Yeah. I mean, they cater to different audiences. So, I mean, your main platform is cable VOD, which actually is not the same audiences.
But we're also on a lot of other, a lot of other platforms, and I think that. It's changing, whereas at one point it really enabled us to weather the financial marketplace breakdown and stay in business. We're evolving even more now, and kind of looking at the kinds of films that are working and aren't working. And VOD is just, it's one piece of the whole pie. It's not, I think, disingenuous to say, well, this is going to save the industry and save the lack of a hard disk DVD. It's not. It's going to be multiple things that.
Amy?
I was going to say that I think it's that the lack of transparency and maybe just the lack of history are important, because one thing we do know, as Bingham mentioned, is that, for instance, when we did make the move, which most of us experienced, from no VHS to VHS and then from VHS to DVD, which all happened in my tenure in film. I started in film before there was VHS, and after VHS, and before DVD, and now soon after DVD, was that foreign language films really suffered, because the way people interact with television is different from the way they interact in a movie theater. When you're watching TV, you're, making dinner, talking on the phone, whatever else, you're doing something else, and if you don't speak the language, you got to read the subtitles. And it did hurt foreign language films. They were not as successful as perhaps they could have been. So what's going to happen with streaming? So, you could stream on your TV, so maybe it's the same thing. But you can also watch on your computer something we're used to reading text on, right? So maybe that will be better, right? I mean, we all
also TVs have gotten bigger. It's a big difference now to watch a foreign language film on a 46-inch screen than it was on a 21-inch screen.
Although I can also watch Netflix on my phone. So, I can watch, my own films, that big. So there's so many different platforms and how we're going to, am I going to read subtitles on my phone? I can barely read the thing anyway. So it's not clear what's going to be successful in the context of different technology and in different platforms. And the fact that we don't have that much feedback yet affects everything. Because we need these backup markets, it's affecting what's opening theatrically. It's affecting what we choose to acquire, what we choose to restore. So it's a very, to say that we're in the middle of a boiling pot is, we're all, nobody knows exactly what's happening or which way to go.
And interestingly, it's also related to what you were talking about, Dana. Information and the way we get our information is also changing, and there's always been an extraordinary interrelationship between independent films and the information about them. And because the media is changing and isn't changing at the same rate or in the same way as the modes of consumption and distribution, it's very confusing for a lot of people. The absence of film critics and regional film critics, the absence of the same amount of journalistic coverage of independent films. You were talking about the critics who aren't there in the regional cities. They don't have entertainment reporters anymore. They have like one person who writes about everything that isn't hard news and obituaries. So you end up with a dead film.
But by the same token, you also have a lot of people consuming the profoundly great amount of information available online. It's just that
in different ways.
It's not edited, a lot of it.
But there's a thing.
Or proofread.
There's a disconnect. The audience has gotten older, as I've said, and I think there's general agreement about that. But an older audience, say an older demographic that are members of the Film Society of Lincoln Center, or are members of not-for-profit film centers like the Jacob Burns in Pleasantville or in Pelham. This is an older demographic who've been watching films their entire lives, who've been accessing and processing the information from hard print newspapers, largely, most of the time. And these are not, generally speaking, computer-friendly people. These are not rabid computer internet users, where most of the information is being processed. How do they access that? Are they online all the time? Are they looking at Movie Phone? And are they looking online for showtimes and buying tickets online? Yes, some, but not as many as would easily look in a newspaper that's available in Cleveland or Cincinnati or in Fort Worth and look for the showtimes in the movie clock. I mean, there is a disconnect in terms of an older prime core audience for foreign language films of a certain kind and independent films of a certain kind, and how they find out where it's playing and what theater and what time.
Amy?
Bingham, you got to move on. you got to modernize. I just think that I think it's true maybe for the very specialized, but I think I see an older. I think look at Jacob Burns. They must just all go on the website to see what's on, right? I don't know. I think
those folks.
I think they do.
Respond to email. They don't surf. They don't dig on the net, but they respond to email. That's as deep as they go online.
And I do think the best thing about all this is the as you pointed out earlier, the availability of all these films to absorb for a younger audience is great, because I think the sort of 20-somethings that have certainly seen Bronson and Valhalla Rising and Pusher Trilogy is probably online, or it's probably not theatrically, which for us is we're going to go very wide with Nicholas's next film. There's a certain cool factor that all those films being available somehow to the audience is good. So I think that part's good, and I think we just have to work with it. The newspapers seem to be gone, and the critics. So we better just figure out what we're going to do.
Amy? Amy?
To sell Insidious. I mean, you're spending millions and
Yeah.
millions of dollars on television.
We are. I know.
Amy?
Yeah.
Just talk. They're talking.
I was just going to say that part of the lack of transparency about who's watching what on streaming is that we don't know. We know who shows up at the theater, but we don't know who's watching. And I actually don't think that it's true that there isn't a new generation. I think it's a different set of films that younger people are watching. I was actually hoping somebody younger than us would have been on this panel, because I think there is a lot of energy and interest from the younger people who I've hired, who are well, you were younger, dear, but,
And also,
I have 20-year-old interns, and
Give us
they're younger. They're
yeah, but
younger
it's like,
than
if
we
I
are.
was talking a 15-year history, it's like they were 5, they're not going to have much to say about it.
But absolutely. But it was just interesting to hear. Maybe people in the audience will talk, because I think the young interns who I've hired do watch a lot of stuff, and are interested in a lot of things, and approach it a different way. So I'm not sure that we're not building different audiences. Maybe not for the same films that meant so much to us. Maybe people are not watching Bergman and I don't know.
But they can.
But I think
they can, and also
They'll get there.
they can,
But
they
they're not
may,
paying
we don't
for
know.
it. The problem is they don't want to pay for it, I think. And all my interns, I always ask them, they're like, well, no, I don't want to pay for it. And so that's, it's another conversation, but piracy is a huge issue, On a film that we had called The Human Centipede, which is kind of hit the zeitgeist, I would say, a huge majority of the young people I spoke to saw it for free, or saw it online, or saw it pirated somehow, and it's really disturbing.
And that was the case with Black Dynamite. Like every advanced screening we ever did, people showed it to us on their iPods. They owned
Thanks
the
for
movie
that.
and loved it. Exactly. Yeah. But it is funny too about this point that you're bringing up, because we have a son who's a freshman in college, and he found Insidious online. So he told me, but he didn't want to turn in the site, and I was like, let me just put it to you like this, if you want to stay at that college for 4 years, you're going to give us the name of that site. And he sent it immediately, but there is a sense of, well, do I really want to pay for the 3D? I'll just go to the 2D. I can find this online. Why should I go out? It is a whole nother sort of way of looking at it than the way that we all did it, where part of it was the scene of being there. They have their own little scenes, and they get to the theater, but there's sort of a common sense of the movie, but it's not necessarily the event of the night. Does that make sense? And it's like just trying to still get it out there. So, I think that in some ways we are still very hopeful about the future of movies, and there are more and more movies.
So we're going to open it up for Q&A in just a moment, but before we do, we have kind of a special treat that Amy's going to set up for us.
Thanks. I hope it's going to work, a 2-minute clip from the film restoration that we just finished that we're going to be bringing out next year. It's a 1961 film. And it's a meta film about making a film. It's called The Connection. It was made by New York filmmaker Shirley Clark. And this is just a short clip, but in it you'll see the man is addressing the camera, and he's addressing the man. It's a fiction film, but in the film, a film is being made, and he's addressing the guy making the film. So I hope you'll enjoy it.
They got a saying in this world. It isn't the shit that will do you in, it's the lack of it. Now, I steal, but I only steal from people I don't like. You see, I wouldn't take a matchstick from a friend of mine. Look, Mr. Dunn, I like telling stories best, but, well, right now I'm kind of sick. I mean, you can understand. You've seen a lot of movies of fellas like me. It's torturous. Now, look, I could use $5 more. Only until I get paid. I'm supposed to see this fella about a job next week. Somebody introduce me. Hey, dig yourself. Well, anyhow, I'll be rolling in the bread then. But now I'm sorry to tell. Look, I got some powerful stories in me when that shit is flowing through my vein. So, how about it, huh, Mr. Dunn?
No, Sam, I'm busy. See me later.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'm gonna go and lay down a while, I guess.
Before you start taking questions, I want to point out not only how beautiful the restoration was, but how nice it was to watch a movie here while the programmer of the center is 2 seats away from me. Just want to acknowledge that this is a great room to see a movie in, and I wouldn't mind seeing my movies on this screen someday.
Okay, we'll start the Q&A, and we're going to start it off with a question via Twitter, courtesy of Eric Cohn.
Yeah, this question comes from, probably appropriately, the Twitter handle On Demand Weekly. And they ask, where do you want to be 15 years from now?
Man, reclining somewhere in the shade about 90 miles north of the city.
So you don't want to be in the business 15 years from now?
I would love to be in the business 15 years from now, but who knows? I mean, I'm amazed I'm still in it now, frankly.
I always joke that we'll be the ones coming down the theater center aisle, kicking people out of the aisle seat with our walkers. Sit there, you know. Hopefully we'll still be going to movies.
I would like to be employed.
Yeah, I just want to keep doing it.
Ira?
More money, less work.
It's just always the reverse.
Yeah. No, I mean, I still want to be finding these new directors and working with it. That keeps you quite young, working with people like this Nick Refn. You know, you can't keep up with him. So it's fun. So there'll be more of those.
I'd like to be celebrating the 30th anniversary of IndieWire. No, I'd like to do this in whatever form and over a wide array of areas until I drop, whether that's in an hour and a half or 30 years from now.
Amy?
Yeah, I think it's a miracle I'm still in business. I'm constantly shocked that we're still around. So I'd like to keep shocking myself. It'd be nice to be doing this in 15 years. I have no idea what that will entail. It'll be a very different business. But I hope people still want to be seeing images from the past and the present, and hope, I don't know. We'll see.
How about you? Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah, damn.
15 years from now. I would like to, actually, in a similar way, I'd like to be doing very much what I'm doing now, on an ever-growing scale, and figuring out how to make the world of independent film, independent thinkers, widely available, entertaining, and relevant. I mean, it's not, I could keep doing that till I'm dead. I'd be all right with that.
Hear, hear.
First audience question is here.
Yes, this is sort of going a little different area from when you started out about sort of hinting that maybe independent film and foreign film is irrelevant. But I started thinking that since I've come to New York from Boston in the last 30 years, it used to be, I used to go to foreign films and independent films for erotica, for cutting edge on race, for topicality, and those have all been co-opted, it seems to me, by television and by the mainstream cinema. So the fact that there are so many film societies out there, film festivals and independent films and 12 releases a week that are reviewed by the New York Times, says something about the general resilience of where you're sitting. And still, because I don't see the new John Cassavetes, I don't see the new John Sayles, I don't see that, and yet I'm still interested. I saw so many independent films through Netflix in the last month or the last few years. So I don't think you're irrelevant, but you do see how things have changed. And the big majors have taken over a lot of the topics that used to be done in the 60s and 70s by you guys. Do you agree with that?
Have you seen Terry? No. By the way, well, there's a filmmaker who's, you're talking about John Sayles and Cassavetes. There's a filmmaker, and I'm sure everyone here could name 5, if we can all remember that well at this age, that current filmmakers that are doing things that are unusual and that are doing things that haven't been done. So they're still out there. They may be harder to find in some ways, but this was across the street. Terry for several weeks. It's still playing downtown. Everybody has films like that.
Yeah, there are very exciting new filmmakers. The problem is, and it has nothing to do with filmmakers or film, it's just a more mature medium. If somebody could break ground in the 1950s, there's been 60 years since then. So, it's okay. I think that from a creative standpoint, movies are as good if not better, than ever. It's just how we consume them, how we find out about them, and if that's changed, then that doesn't make it or us irrelevant. We're all still here, and we're finding new and different ways to function. We're, the thing about the filmmakers and the people who write about them and the people who traffic in independent films is that we're independent-minded people. We don't go away.
Next question.
I guess this is more of a comment, but you were talking about age of independent film goers, and I can only speak from my own experience, and my friends at home. But I'm 24, and I watch at least 3 movies a week, and independent films.
May I ask you where you're watching? No, seriously.
IFC Center. Film,
in theaters, you go to?
Yeah, in theaters, Lincoln Square. I don't like streaming because I bought an HD TV, and the HD is not that great, so I watch it on Blu-ray, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But even at home, I'm from North Carolina, and the good thing about like VOD, you were saying, is we don't have IFC Center, we don't have independent. Well, we do actually. Okay, we do have an art house theater, but let's say. Somewhere more rural North Carolina, the only way they can see these movies is online or VOD or something. So I guess that's kind of my comment. At least, we are going to see movies.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Bless you.
Do you think eventually that like theaters, like the whole experience or the possibility of seeing a film in a theater on a screen is just going to like disappear? Because
we all say no, in unison. I think we all say no.
Do you still like to stare into a fire, from your living room or outside when you're camping? It's just, I really believe it's in our DNA to go out, to get out of our houses, of our trailers, of our giant 30,000 square foot houses, or our 210 square feet apartments, and go into a room like this with total strangers and have a communal experience.
Yeah, the communal experience is exactly what it's all about. It doesn't matter about the technology. It doesn't matter. I mean, all of the things that people get caught up in. The thing that you cannot duplicate in your living room is this experience right here. And I do believe that as each generation gets older, they're going to crave this experience more and more. I came across a really interesting statistic recently, because my company has accidentally found itself in the business of opera. And when we worry about aging audiences, think about that one for a minute. When we do our operas, our average age in the audience is people about 70. And what's interesting is that if you go back 50 years and you look at the average age of opera audience, it was 70. And it's not the same people, obviously. So the thing is that I actually do. I mean, one of the things that I hold out great hope for is I think that there's a generation that we're all sitting around worrying about now. I think that all they have to do is get exposed to positive experiences in movie theaters, and they'll keep coming back because it just simply isn't the same experience.
It's like what
as
the
seeing
Harry
it at
Potter
home.
series did for reading for kids 10 years ago. I mean, those kids, my son is now 18. He started reading those books, and he never just started reading everything as a result of it.
I also think it matters on the quality of the experience, not even on the screen, but how the theaters evolve, which has been an issue. It will change, and there has to be. You have to enjoy it. You have to have it has to be a good experience and not an annoying one. At the theaters, and I think we've seen a lot of change in that. Not so much here, maybe in Manhattan, but in Los Angeles at theaters like ArcLight that are giving, that actually have a mission that's it's supposed to be for how the director wanted to see the film presented. So they have to adapt and everything, and I think if they do, it'll always be there.
What I miss, I really miss, is what video killed here in Manhattan and in every major city was repertory cinema.
Coming back.
Well,
It's coming back.
But I'll tell you what won't come back are the seedy.
Your shoes sticking to the
failure
floor?
where they had a dog in the theater.
Oh man!
I'm not nostalgic for bad prints and
No,
scratches
I'm nostalgic
and
for
sticky floors.
I'm nostalgic for theaters that are now Rite Aids and CVS's, physical structures. I love movie theaters, and old ones. One of the great things about spending time in Los Angeles is that they, for the most part, they go out of their way to try to preserve some of the oldest movie theaters in the country and keep them in the shape that they were when they were brand new in 1919. And that kind of experience is really, really special. And the ones like downtown in Chelsea, like the old Elgin, which was a favorite of mine, it wasn't a classic repertory house unless it had a patina of urine in the air.
Dude, I think you're alone on that one.
The words patina and urine do not
yeah,
go
exactly.
together.
Hang on.
Hi. So I love movie theaters too, especially art house cinemas and old buildings. I was just thinking about what you guys were saying about having an experience in a movie theater. I don't think that it's necessarily unique to an independent film. Seeing Harry Potter at midnight in the fall was one of like the most memorable, exciting experiences. You know, a ton of college kids like filled this house, and it was like we were 13 again, like cheering at like every awesome plot point. But recently, this week I saw a tabloid, and I saw Aaron Morris speaking at the Museum of Moving Image, and then saw it again. But I think it's really interesting. I don't know how feasible this is in terms of distribution. I love going to events. I'm lucky enough to live in New York, where I can go to the Burns and I can go to the Film Society here and countless other events across the city. But especially with that film in particular, it's like this constant experience that's still going on when the subject of the film shows up at all of these events, and it's like the story continues, and it's part of the experience and something that's memorable. And so I wonder, like, what kind of, is that a possibility to kind of make these up close and personal interactions as part of the new model?
These kind of things are under constant discussion right now in the whole independent film world. There's a word that we use that is probably not a real word. We talk about eventizing the theatrical experience. And it's, you know, one of the interesting things is that digital technology has enabled us to eventize more screenings of more films in more places than would have been possible under the old model. I mean, in the sense that a person can only be in one place at one time, but if you start broadcasting these things to more theaters at the same time, doing Q&A sessions that include Twitter feeds coming in, you know, like we're doing here, I mean, all these sorts of things actually take the resources that you have available to you and make it so that people can feel like they're part of a much larger event. We did a series here at Lincoln Center that just ended last week called From Britain with Love. It was a series of 6 British independent films, and we had Q&As with all the directors that came from here. 3 of them came from here, 3 of them came from England, and they were broadcast live into movie theaters all over the United States. And so, you know, if you're in West Palm Beach, Florida, at a little, you know, art house, and you actually have live on screen somebody who's, you know, in Liverpool and answering your questions because you can tweet them from your seats in the theater, people feel like they're part of something much larger, and that actually does create the sense of an event outside of a place like New York.
I started a company 2 years ago called Area 23A. The concept was to create an experience that can't be duplicated on a flat screen in your living room or a laptop in your dorm room. And a lot of these are performance films. We had a documentary about the ukulele. The audience for it is this big. But in every city, there are, you know, 500 people who actually care. And without any advertising, we filled theaters, one-night events all the way down the West Coast with a movie and then a ukulele performance. It was a virtuoso ukulelist, and bring your own ukulele and jam afterwards. A lot of political films, social action films, things where there can be a lecture, a panel discussion, a Q&A, things like that to compel people to go to the theater. It's sort of the It's the real world iteration of what I was talking about. They were there in the flesh, so it's more limited, but it was very viable. And as we were talking about before, the audience is very focused, so you really don't have to spend a lot of money to attract them. You just have to let them know.
I tried that with a theremin one time. It went very, very wrong. It just didn't work.
But filmmakers acknowledge, first of all, filmmakers do make films to communicate, and they acknowledge that these days they often have to work harder. I released a film this year called I Am, and Tom Shadyac, who's like a big Hollywood director, he made this very personal documentary film. He went to, I think, something like 18 cities, and it was built into the whole marketing plan from day one that he would be there. He would do in-person appearances at word-of-mouth screenings before we opened, and he was invariably, for the first dozen consecutive cities that we opened, he was in the theater opening weekend, and those shows invariably sold out. And he did this thing afterwards that was, revival meeting, Q&A, channeling, I don't know what he does, but people adored it, and it enhanced the experience of watching that film immeasurably, and it contributed extraordinarily to the box office and the folklore about the film. So a lot more filmmakers acknowledge that they have to, pack light and take their show on the road and work their asses off.
Yeah, Amy?
For doing archival films, one of the things we have done a lot of is silent films, and it's fascinating that now a lot of our silent films have a new life with live music. For one thing, and I'll take just a second, there's so many young musicians who want to write for silent films. So we have our film, The Adventures of Prince Ahmed, which is a very early animated film. There are musicians all over the country writing scores for this feature film. But I just wanted to say that I think that the other thing about younger audiences is that many younger audiences include people who are making films. And I think that because the technology is really easy, whether they're making YouTube videos or they're making small films, a lot more people, my kid is making, my 15-year-old is working on a film, and he's a science kid. He doesn't even want to do this kind of thing. I think that people are interacting with films in different ways because they have more experience of actually trying to do it. And I think that can be a really exciting thing for the future, and I hope it will be. Yeah.
Okay, we got time for one more question.
Okay.
You can get one more, but really fast. Okay.
Seems like one of the ways the marketplace of films has changed a little bit is, I guess 15 years ago you'd have to drive to another state to see a movie like Rushmore, and now recently there are films like Juno, which came out, which is almost kind of mathematically calculated to appeal to film intellectuals and serious film people, as well as your aunt who sees maybe 2 movies a year. And I want, a small independent film not only has to compete nowadays, I think, with, say, Thor and whatnot, but also these interesting kind of mainstream feature in indie clothing movies. And I wondered if some of you guys saw that as a blessing or a curse.
Yeah, I'm really glad you asked that question because it sort of brings things full circle, because the thing we didn't touch on that I think is one of the massive changes that's happened in the business is what I like to call the Miramaxization of the independent film business, or another way of putting it is the indie bubble. And actually what's interesting is I think that the 15-year history of IndieWire actually tracked the rise and fall of the indie bubble, because right at that moment when IndieWire was starting was the moment when the major studios were in effect stepping in and beginning to take over the entire independent film business and distract the audience that was out there with enormous amounts of marketing that were getting people to think of these larger movies, these aggressively middle-brow movies, as being independent film. And I think that the reason why I'm optimistic about the market right now is I think that era has ended. That basically the studios have gotten out of the business. There's a couple of stragglers, but it's reopened the business. It goes back to something Bingham said earlier when he was talking about how these movies like Secrets and Lies wouldn't do $5 million these days, et cetera, et cetera. Well, when I get nostalgic for the time when independent film was truly great, I don't think about the time 15 years ago. I think about the time 25 years ago, and I think we're back there now, which is that it was a fledgling business when the expectations were incredibly low, and where $1 million gross actually was something that we did a jig about because it would be profitable because we kept the expenses down. And now with all of this new opportunity, because of the way that you can reach audiences directly through the internet and through all these other things that are going on, it does mean that we're back to the point where that business model that existed 25 years ago is actually possible again. I don't think we've figured it all out yet, but I do think that we're at a great moment because I'm going to quote one of our colleagues who's not here, Richard Lorber, who said this on a panel, and I think it's one of the most brilliant summaries of what's going on in the business right now. He said, we're at a time when anything's possible and nothing works.
Perfect note on which to end this panel.
Okay, quick question.
We're not ending.
Well, go ahead. I just want to ask, knowing everything you guys now know, the good, the bad, the ugly of independent film distribution, if you guys were to make a movie today as filmmakers, what advice would you give yourself? What model of distribution would you guys follow? Because I don't know how many filmmakers are here today, but I think that that's what's on everyone's mind.
I mean, it honestly depends on the film, I think. Yeah, I mean, I think to kind of back up, I couldn't agree more with what you said, Ira. It's sort of anything is possible right now, and yet nothing works. So I think you have to go into making a film with every case scenario and knowing kind of what your film is and historically. I mean, part of the problem is that what's happened is people were making movies, raising money and making movies, and that process can often take years. And by the time you get your movie done and released, everything has changed, and nothing what you modeled it on works anymore. So I think it's really working with a producer who's smart and can kind of weather what those changes are and be prepared. But how your film gets distributed will be kind of what's going on in the marketplace at that time, and it's going to be completely different a year from now, and that's a reality. I think that's something that
I would make a very good movie, and then I would pray a lot.
That too.
Since we're about to end, I just wanted to say, I wanted us to maybe just acknowledge the passing of Don Krim, who was such an important person to me, and I think to many of us, and to the independent film community, who died this year. And he was such a wonderful person, and losing him is a big change in the last 15 years. So I want to just stop and think about him for a sec.
We have to also acknowledge Marty Zeidman, who was one of the great independent distributors, and his memorial is tomorrow.
And with that, thank you guys so much for coming, and thank you so much for being on the panel. You guys are great.
Thanks a lot.